welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic that recently came up in one of my coaching sessions. Today, we're going to talk about authenticity and why it is extremely important to show up fully as yourself within relationships. So let's get to it. So what's really interesting is I feel like the common consensus between us all, whether or not we realize it or not, is, well, that was a weird sentence, whether or not we realize it or not, is that we feel that we can only be ourselves, 100% authentically ourselves when we're alone. But when we're in relationship, we feel that we can't. So there's like this weird place where we may want to be in relationship, but we don't know how to connect with another person, or the ways in which we were shown to connect with another person is unhealthy, or it's almost like we have to sacrifice parts of who we are in order to be with someone. And that's like a really sad place to be. But it's interesting because I've noticed it come up in myself when it has come to establishing relationships with others. And it doesn't matter if we're talking friend or romantically, right? And so I want to talk about authenticity because oftentimes what I see with people is they may start to get involved with someone, right? Or they may start to connect with someone and they start questioning who they are, and they start questioning the ways in which they're behaving towards another. And while there are certainly times where that is appropriate, right? We also need to recognize our needs and our wants and what um, some of our boundaries are. And I think like after I discussed about boundaries in the previous episode, I thought it was really important to talk about authenticity because I really feel like, so many of us crave intimacy, but um, we really can't establish a level of intimacy with another partner until we're willing to be 100% authentic. So let's dive into it. What is authenticity? So when we're talking about authenticity, we're talking about something that is genuine, something that is real, something that is true. We are all unique expressions of consciousness. And, it's only when we can truly kind of honor that and understand that we can fully show up as ourselves. But first, we kind of need to understand what we think we are and understand what that is rooted in. And for many of us, until we start becoming more self-aware, much of what we identify ourselves as has to do with the way in which our parents decided we should be. So, oftentimes parents, and I'm saying this understanding that all parents have great intentions for their children, but oftentimes, uh, parents raise their children with the idea that this person, this thing that they have brought into life is to be molded, that this spirit, that their child is not necessarily a unique expression of consciousness, that it does not already bear a certain level of authenticity, that it is literally just this thing that is to be molded to however the parent, whatever the parent thinks is right for the child. Or oftentimes it's not necessarily even what is right for the child. When it comes to socialization, it oftentimes is what is right for the parent. So I'm going to give you an example of this. For example, oftentimes you may have a child that comes into this world and has certain natural abilities. So say that the child is extremely analytical and has a huge interest in the world and how it works, and loves analyzing and looking at things a certain way. But say that you have a parent who is who grew up loving art, and they really didn't get to live out their dreams of being an artist. Instead, they were pushed to maybe be an accountant. And so they uh, project this need that they had to be creative and to be an artist onto their child, who is authentically analytical and interested in the workings of the natural world. You know, just say that that child would be the ideal scientist, studying, uh, you know, microorganisms and all of that stuff. But the parent has this underlying need of the child to reflect back to the parent what the parent always wanted, which was to be an artist. Or say, for example, you have a parent who, for whatever reason, doesn't necessarily um, may feel that they are out of control, or they don't have a strong sense of self. Um, you know, their child may come into the world again as a unique expression, but the parent needs the child to show up as a child that is in control, that has all of the answers, that can guide the parent, and or save the parent, fix the parent. And so oftentimes, you know, what we think is an authentic expression of ourselves is really just what our parents wanted us or needed us to be. They basically just saw us as a ball of clay and chose to mold us accordingly. And of course, this is in usually in tandem with what is accepted in society and what is considered just socialization. So, you know, say the most coveted thing for any parent is to have a well-behaved child. So if you're a child and you're in the grocery store and you want a candy bar, you're a parent. If you decide to throw a temper tantrum because you want something and your parent is denying you the very thing that you want, your parent is going to tell you to stop crying, to stop being ridiculous, and not everybody gets what they want. And you are going to move forward with those very same ideas because they are teaching you or trying to teach you an acceptable way of behaving in public. And that is not necessarily authentic, right? The authentic approach would be to understand that children, to kind of meet the child where it is, which is understanding that a child wants something and they're upset naturally when they can't have it, because that is a very natural response to have when we want something that we've been told we can't have, um, and to honor that emotional response. But that oftentimes that is not what happens. So your personality is just made up of things of what your parents found acceptable, or is made up of ways in which they wanted you to be, or ways in which they thought you should be. So with this, unfortunately, we kind of grow up thinking that we might be authentic, but then when we start to really analyze ourselves and ask, who am I really? Beyond the spiritual perspective of being, you know, a unique expression of consciousness, we kind of determine that everything that we are is just conditioning. Everything that we are is basically what everybody else projected on us of what they wanted us to be or of what we needed to be. And it's tough because a lot of us create lives out of this. Many, like all of us create lives out of this. We become the accountant even though we want to be the artist, or we become the artist even though we really want to be a scientist. So what can happen is, without even realizing, we go down this road of creating a life that is completely inauthentic to who we really are, and we engage in relationships the same way. And that's where, you know, unfortunately, it keeps us from connecting with people in an intimate manner. And so, how do we go about really recognizing or understanding who we are authentically. And I would have to say, I think the first way to go about it is kind of the journey to self-awareness, right? Which is recognizing the incongruences between who we are internally versus who we are externally. Meaning, if I wake up and I am feeling depressed and sad or frustrated, and I go into work and I am passing a coworker in the hall and they say, "Hey, how are you?" And you say, "Oh my God, I'm so good, da 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 da." You obviously are showing up inauthentically to how you actually feel. And so, what we want to do is kind of understand that what we're trying to do when we are trying to become more authentic is we want to match the inside to the outside, or we want to match our external behaviors to the way that we actually internally feel. And so it's really kind of like this idea of, are you, we all know the expression, the sheep in wolf's clothing, or even it could be reversed, the wolf in sheep's clothing. But what you want is you want to be the sheep and the sheep's clothing, or the wolf and the wolf's clothing. You don't want there to be incongruences in who you are. And I understand that, because I can kind of feel that there might be some resistance to this, in the sense that you're saying, well, Kim, I mean, if I hate my boss and I am sitting there in a meeting with him, and if I be 100% authentic in the sense that, I dislike him and I tell him that I dislike him, that's going to have certain consequences and repercussions that I don't want. And so I'm not saying that you are necessarily going to 100% be authentic in your life all the time. There are going to be times in which it is required for your best interest, right, to be inauthentic. But it is more a choosing. You are consciously choosing to be inauthentic, or you are what we call consciously inauthentic. But for the most part, a person, when I think about like a person feeling content in the world, and I remembered, honestly, my therapist told me this when I was seeing her regularly years ago. I remembered sitting there and we were talking about happiness. And she said, because I've shared with you on multiple occasions, I'm a person who I I feel, for predominantly for the first like 20 to 30 years of my life, I denied a lot of my emotional state. And she said to me, she goes, the people that are most content, or that feel most at peace in their life, are people who honor their emotions, who feel what they feel, and they don't put on a facade that they feel any differently. They own it. And so to me, being content is right in alignment with being authentic. So, what we want to do is we want to try to align ourselves as much as possible, right? In the sense that my internal is what I'm portraying on the external. And yes, while I understand that sometimes I may have to be consciously inauthentic, for the most part, right? Like 90%, I'm being authentic. I'm honoring I'm honoring what it is that I want to be in the world. I'm honoring how I feel. I'm honoring the types of relationships that I have. I don't care about what other people's needs or wants are to the detriment of my needs and wants, right? It's not that we don't care about what other people's needs are. It's that we prioritize our own, and we say, okay, if I can show up for myself authentically in this way, can I honor somebody else's authentic needs at the same time? And the beautiful thing about what happens when you kind of shift into your own authenticity is you have a greater compassion and level of understanding for another person's authenticity, because when you're standing in your authentic self, when you are self-aware, and when you can show up for yourself and feel self-validated, you can fully allow that in another person, because it's almost like it creates a level of autonomy but also a level of compassion and love, right? Because truthfully, if we're going to talk about it, um, you know, being authentic is an act of self-acceptance. It's an act of self-love. So the more that you show up for yourself in that way, the more you're going to find that you can allow other people to be who they are authentically. And when you start to kind of become more self-aware, and when you start to kind of ask yourself, okay, who am I authentically? You then also become more aware of your projections and your expectations. And so you're less likely to project onto other people what it is that you need them to be, or you can at least just be more aware of that. Um, the other thing that I want to talk about, like how to become more authentic, I think that to some extent, authenticity requires us to really be vulnerable, because we're um, being asked to very much go into understanding who we authentically want to be, but also um, be willing to kind of like tell it like it is. And that does require, again, like this certain level of vulnerability, because we've been so deeply conditioned and socialized to the point of like, well, I can't it's not safe for me to be real, because when I was real as a kid, when I was crying in the checkout line because I wanted Reese's peanut butter cups, I was shamed and I was disapproved of, and I was not accepted into society, or I was taught that I wasn't going to be accepted into society. And so there's so many of us really not living um, to our fullest degree of authenticity, because we're just afraid that we're not going to feel accepted. And so that does require a level of vulnerability to show up and just be like, okay, like I am doing this and I'm going to express this feeling or this pain or this perspective or this belief system or this thought, and I'm taking a risk that it may not be acceptable. It may not be perceived as a good thing. It might be perceived as I'm a horrible person, or I am unhealthy, or whatever. And so it requires us to really be vulnerable. Um, so yeah, I think like that's like another way, like if you can more fully become aware of who you are authentically, to kind of just put yourself out there more and more and more, you'll increase your comfort level around being vulnerable, and with that increases the level at which you can show up in the world authentically. So the other thing that I want to kind of suggest as like a how to kind of really clue into who you are authentically is this idea of I do this often when I'm in meditation, and honestly, it was Joe Dispenza, I believe, who it was one of his meditations that kind of like occurred to me. But it was also interesting because I would do it when I first started meditating, because I felt like it kind of helped me meditate. And that is kind of like this out of body, like pretending like I was outside of my body looking at myself. So it's almost like if you kind of want to see your actions and your behaviors from an authentic perspective, you can't simply look at it from your perspective, because you're the one who's going through the motions. So it's kind of like this idea of viewing yourself from outside of yourself. And the way that you kind of want to start doing this is through meditation. So if you go into meditation, you kind of just want to imagine that. And what I used to do when I started meditating is I would literally just imagine myself floating towards the ceiling. I don't know why that is, but then I would be looking down at me while I was in meditation. And it was like, I thought to myself, I'm like, this is kind of creepy. But it was also really interesting. I think it also had like a certain level of protection to it too. It was almost like my higher self was watching, my human self in this in this action of meditation. And so I kind of like felt like it allowed me to like almost like perch over me and guard me and protect me. But anyway, you can do this not only, you can basically take this practice out of meditation and do it like throughout the day. So you kind of want to perceive yourself like you would a fly on the wall, which is where it gets really interesting. Because I feel like when you can kind of look at things from that perspective, there may be a lot of ways in which you see that you've been deceptive to yourself. You know, unfortunately, being in this space of I'm a human being, right? It can be really difficult to decipher what is real and what is illusion, and where we may be lying to ourselves, even around our own authenticity. So when you can kind of get outside of yourself, when you can kind of view yourself from another perspective, from an outside perspective, you can kind of see maybe the ways in which you're showing up inauthentically in your life. So anyway, saying all of that, you know, I recently coached a client who was interacting with somebody that she really liked, and she was worried about, you know, she would experience, like they would have a conversation and she would experience something come up in her, and she was scared of sharing it because she felt like that he wasn't necessarily giving, like he wasn't showing up in that space, so then she didn't want to show up in that space. And she said to me, and I hear this phrase used all the time in the dating advice world, I guess is what I would call it, is this idea that you're only to match another person's energy. You don't want to give more than the other person. You just always want to meet them. So basically, if a guy texts you good morning, you're only supposed to text good morning back. That is all you're supposed to do. No more, no less. And I said to her, I'm like, but here's the thing, like when you are not showing up authentically as yourself, you are doing yourself a disservice. Because one, you're shunning yourself. So say that she wanted to respond with, good morning, it's so beautiful out, I can't wait to get outside, da 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 da. If that was her natural way of interacting with another person, and she withdraws from doing that because he's only showing up as this, then she's shunning herself. She's disowning herself. She's shutting down a part of herself. And that part of herself was this beautiful person who wanted to share, who was feeling good about the morning, who was feeling good about life, and she wanted to express that and exude that. And instead, she was like, but he only said good morning. He didn't say anything more than that, so then I'm not going to. And I said to her, you know, this is common behavior that I see in the dating world all the time, but we want you to win big. I love, you know, how we all have this insane ability to manifest whatever it is that we want. We live in this beautiful world that is simply just a reflection of us all the time. And we want these big things. We want love. We want big love, right? We want committed love. We want passionate love. We want these, you know, we want to travel. We want these big dreams. We want to own houses in exotic areas, and we want all of this stuff. But what's so weird is then we're like, okay, but I'm only going to match what is being I'm only going to match the energy that is being given to me. I'm not going to fully be who I am and fully be free in what it is that I desire, and fully show up in my 100% authenticity and be vulnerable in that. And it's amazing because if you are seeking a partnership with someone and you want to meet your person, you want to meet the person that is divinely created for you, you need to show up as you, as who you really are, not who your parents want you to be, not who your third grade teacher wanted you to be, not who, your best friends want you to be. We want you to show up 100% in your authenticity, in your unique expression of consciousness. That's how we want you to show up. And if you're coming and you're approaching interactions with other people that you're wanting to date from this level of, well, I'm only going to match their energy, then how can the universe truly align you with what it is that you want, because you're showing up as somebody else? If Matt only says good morning, and if you only say good morning back, the universe is going to align you with more Matts. It's not going to align you with someone who was divinely created to be with you. It is not going to it's not going to align you with someone who is going to match your expansion, your authenticity, your vulnerability. And that's what we want. We want to win big. We don't want to win playing small. So this whole idea that I see, being thrown around in the dating advice world, you're undercutting yourself. You're cutting yourself off at the knees. You're saying, I am an extremely passionate, loving person who loves to express themselves authentically, but I'm not going to do so if the other person is not doing so. Now, look, I can understand this approach, but this approach really it's rooted in fear. It's rooted in this idea that if I put myself out there, if I be vulnerable, I'm not going to be accepted. And then I may risk not communicating with this person anymore. I may risk them not finding me interesting anymore. But you also are risking you never aligning with what is actually true to you, to what is truly genuine to you, to what is truly real to you. Intimacy can only be established if intimacy is what you're seeking, right? Into me see. If you are seeking a partner who you have a deep connection with, a deep, valid connection, meaning you are connecting on the same level and you are continuously expanding that. If that is what you are seeking, then it is required for you to be authentic and vulnerable. And I just want to pose this whole idea, so often we want to be in partnership in the way that we think this person is giving to us. But that's not how partnership works. And if you truly feel that you have love to give, that you have love to share, that love needs to be in existence within you and being authentic to the level of your to the highest level of your awareness, and you being vulnerable in that is love. That is the same love that you will be extending to this person. And so we don't want to match people's energy. We want to own who we authentically are, and we want to be vulnerable. We want to, as Brene Brown says, dare greatly. Take that risk. Because it's only when you truly show up for yourself that you can truly show up for another. And that is like the greatest gift. The greatest gift that any one of us can give another is presence and acceptance. So let's not play small. Let's grow into, let's unfold the little pearl that is within all of our little lotus blossoms. Let's not be ashamed of who we are. We can own our darkness and our light. And within that space, we can find another who is willing to hold that space as well. Let's win big. Let's move forward in our most unique expression. Okay, guys. Just a reminder, I am offering coaching services now. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can visit my website. It's kimberlydam.com/coaching. In addition, I am offering some workshops in the spring, so be on the lookout for that. I love you. Stay well and stay connected.